running the business under our own terms. And so when you get to make decisions about, okay, well, what events do we want to align with and what kind of people do we want to go meet and support and reach out to, then Swimrun is top of the list. It's just it's cool. We love it. And that's why we're embedded in it.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz, a Swimrun podcast. I am Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 25. We did it. We made it to 25 episodes.
We've made it to 25.
On this week's show, we have the co-founder of Precision Hydration, Andy Blow, who's a former pro triathlete, national champion, Xterra champion.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's a stud.
Yeah, stud athlete, and then put his science background to use when he was having his own nutrition problems as he started to kind of take on athletes and help athletes figure out their hydration problems. But more on that to come.
Yeah.
We are going to get to the shout-outs this week. Now, Chris is going to we have dual shout-outs.
Yeah, we have
Chris is
dual
going to take the
shout-outs.
first one, and then I'll take the second one.
Well, I mean, we can take them both together.
That's true.
So for this week, we wanted to shout out Tim Fleming from the Endurance Performance Training Center. As part of our interview with Precision Hydration, they set us up to get a sweat test, which is essentially
advanced
sweat test. Yeah, you'll hear about this on the interview, but essentially they put a little electrode on you to stimulate the sweat glands. Then they collect that sweat, and then they do an analysis to see how much sodium is in it. Like, what are you losing in terms of electrolytes?
Yeah, sodium loss per liter.
Right, which is
output.
pretty. It's basically genetic, right?
Pretty precise.
Pretty precise. So once you have that information, then you can make sort of decisions. Once you do a sort of a sweat test out in the field, quote unquote, to figure out how much you're losing in terms of sort of an hour's worth of
liters
activity.
per hour. So that there's like two parts to this sort of hydration equation that Precision Hydration has. One of them is the sweat test that Chris and I took, and then like you said, the sweat loss rate, which is how much over an hour of activity do you actually lose.
Right.
And then you combine those two, and like Precision Hydration you do some plus and some minus and then some dividing, and then have at least a better jumping off point for your hydration.
Yeah, so Tim was a really cool guy, super knowledgeable. His shop is down in Mill Valley and
in
Marin County. Just a really nice guy. Great to chat with him. Definitely got some surprises in the sweat test, which we'll talk about on the show.
And you'll hear later, yeah.
But yeah, it was a cool experience. Now, you don't need to get the crazy sweat test we got in order to use Precision Hydration. On their website, they actually have like a questionnaire you can fill out to get something that's a little bit approximate. And yeah, I guess we should we mention now like the super cool thing that's happening, or should we save it?
We should just mention it now.
All right.
Andy at Precision Hydration was kind enough to give the listeners of the Low Tide Boyz a 15% off coupon for any purchase on Precision Hydration through July. So the coupon expires at the end of July, and the code is just Low Tide Boyz with a Z.
So if you're going to buy some stuff, save some money, also make us look good.
That
very
helps.
Important.
Yeah, it's important. The optics of this is very important for us. But I've already placed my order and excited to see. It just came in the mail today. I'm excited to get cracking on that. But before we get too far down that path, let's give our second shout out to an entire country. The country of Japan has been consuming the Swimrun 101 episode at an astronomical for us rate.
Right.
We saw this.
This is all relative.
This
folks.
is all relative to Low Tide Boyz numbers, but we were like, wow, this podcast is really popular. All of a sudden, it makes sense. It's Swimrun 101. And then we looked, literally all the traffic is from Japan. So there's a group of Japanese swimrunners or soon-to-be swimrunners. Welcome.
Yeah. Konnichiwa.
Two more housekeeping things we wanted to touch on this week was don't forget to join the Low Tide Boyz Strava group. It's been cool. We have almost 50 people in there now, and it's really great.
And you get one promise by joining that group.
Oh.
You're basically guaranteed. You're guaranteed to get a like from the two of us.
Yeah,
I've been going in there religiously. I'm just liking everybody
every day. Just
kudos.
And I've been really enjoying seeing what other people are doing and other people sort of in the general Bay Area as well, finding these other swim run routes. I think that stuff's pretty cool. So don't forget to join that. And then also, if you are planning on racing the first post shelter in place Otelo race, Engadin, we have the course preview, expansive.
Yes.
Course preview.
Yes, we dropped that episode previous episode. Episode 24, and we still want everyone's feedback on it. This was a new venture for us, and we hope, we put a lot of love into that episode, so we hope that you guys liked it, and if you didn't like it, let us know so we can fix it.
Yeah, what feedback or anything like that, but I just doing that episode and creating it and hearing all about it, it's like definitely on my bucket list. I'm
races. Sold on southern Switzerland, southeastern Switzerland. And
if you've been puzzled as to why all the cow memes on the Instagram page, you got to listen to that episode and you will get it.
Yep.
Now, some very exciting news on the training front. Our pool has reopened.
Oh,
put in some
you got to put in some
gospel.
Or some Doors of Heaven, some Pearly Gates music.
Pearly Gate music. And so very strict guidelines. We don't really have to go into them now, but you get to book your session. There's one person per lane, social distancing, all that good stuff. So Chris and I were super excited, so excited that we decided to sign up for all the 5:30 slots in the morning.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for you, Chipper. I kind of need to do that, so I appreciate you, being my ride or die guy.
I'm not gonna wake up at 4 or something by myself. There has to be a good reason. And I really enjoyed it because your workouts are just done. They're just knocked out. And so we've had 3 swim sessions this week, and we're gonna have a 4th on Sunday here.
Yep.
So
Father's Day
swim session. How's the pool been feeling?
It's been good. I mean, it's been great to get back into it. I need to do a lot of work. I know that, but it's felt really great. And honestly, the best thing about the pool opening, and I don't know why it took a pandemic for this to happen, being able to reserve your lane time.
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing ever.
So we're excited that the pool's open and to get some more laps. We are loosely following an article that was in Triathlete magazine, which was how to return from swimming in 3 weeks. So it kind of Jerry Rodriguez from
Tower
26, very good, Chris. Open water, swimming genius, I guess some people would refer to him as. Had this nice article in Triathlete magazine. So we're following that, and it's pretty much, we're not blasting all out 1K efforts in the pool for the first workout back. It's very casual. It's kind of just time in the water sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we've been enjoying that, but I'm kind of looking forward to next week from mixing it up from the 10 by 100 with 15 seconds rest in between. Like I'm just looking for something different now. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be in the pool. So speaking of Triathlete magazine, don't forget to check out our monthly column. The first one is about training partners. The second one, we are formulating ideas now, but we have a pretty good idea that we're going to move forward with. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and if you have suggestions or questions you want answered, definitely let us know.
Yeah, send those to us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
With that, let's get straight to the interview. We think you guys are really going to enjoy it with Andy Blow, co-founder, Precision Hydration.
Enjoy, and stay thirsty, my friends.
With us today, we have Andy Blow. He has a few top 10 Ironman finishes, 70.3 finishes. He also happens to be an Xterra World Age Group champ. He has a degree in sports and exercise science and was once the team sports scientist for the Benetton and Renault F1 teams. I have some questions about that. He raced his first swim run, the Attila World Championship, in 2014. And in 2011, he founded Precision Hydration to help athletes solve their hydration issues. PH became the official sponsor and official hydration partner of Attila in 2017. Welcome, Andy.
Hi there, guys. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for coming on. So we always ask people, how'd you hear about Swimrun and how you came to that journey? But I mean, you're a pro triathlete, you're super stacked, athletic resume. Can you just give us a little bit of your history and how you came up in the sport and then found Swimrun?
Yeah, for sure. I thought Swimrun sounded, Swimrun came along at the perfect time for me because I'd fizzled out of doing Ironman and that kind of thing competitively around 2006, 2007. I had to have knee surgery because of the abuse I'd put my body through over the years, and I'd sort of rehabbed myself and was getting fit again. But I'd kind of decided I didn't want anything really super competitive to do anymore, but I wanted to stay fit and started looking for races. And the first thing that attracted me to the Otelo sort of concept was the fact that you raced in pairs. And a good friend of mine, a guy called Elliot Chalafor, who was a pretty accomplished triathlete, he said to me, because we'd done a few other races together, we'd done like some long distance multi-day running events in pairs and cycling events and that kind of thing. And he said, "How do you fancy a crack at this?" And I was like, "Yeah, that looks absolutely brilliant." So we reached out to Mats and Michael at Otelo and sort of blagged our way into the race, basically. And that was that. Awesome. It was fantastic.
That's actually not that dissimilar from Chipper and me, except we're just way, way slower and in no way professionals. But that's kind of how it happened. Like, we would do double century rides together. We would do, No Man Left Behind, ultra marathons and things like that. And Swimrun just seemed like a great way to kind of keep doing the partner thing. So how did that experience go doing the World Championship?
Yeah, it was decent. It was way harder than we thought. Although the weather that year in 2014 was just so lovely and benign. It was like glass mill pond water, no wind. It was warm. It got a bit hot at times, and all we'd done was the classic, as you did back then, literally lopped the legs off some old triathlon wetsuits, not really thought about it too much, not really done a hell of a lot of specific training, if I'm honest. We'd done quite a lot of running and quite a lot of swimming, but we hadn't really got all the finer details figured out. And then we jumped in. We didn't use a tether, which was probably the biggest mistake we made all day, actually, just because ever since then I've raced with Elliot again and I've raced with other people, and we've always used tethers and found it to be really beneficial. But we ended up at one point, I think we were sort of hanging around the kind of mid-teens in the race, like 15th, 16th place. And Elliot sort of said, I think, if we push on a bit, a top 10 is on here. And I can't remember where we came, but I think we did just about sneak a top 10 in the end.
Oh,
which
wow.
when you look at the times that people are doing now is a feat that I would never repeat again. Because the sort of standard has gone up significantly, and it is always quite nice now to have a little, a top 10 on the resume, even though, like I say, the standard now is a different league, basically.
It's definitely interesting how, the first time someone did the original four did the course, it took them like
28 hours.
Yeah.
And now it's like, on a good day, it's so much faster.
Yeah. It's pretty wild there. Well, they also were just having a float on their mattress too across the pig swim, so a little bit more optimized for racing.
Definitely, but all the kit they used to take and all that sort of stuff. I think that maverick attitude towards it was part of the attraction. I'm sure. I don't know if it was the case for you guys, but it's still, and that the sport, although it's getting more competitive and getting more streamlined, it still feels pretty, I guess, I used to do triathlon in the 90s when it was a relatively young sport, and it has that sort of feel about it, which is what I actually love.
Yeah,
you're probably the 10th person that said that to us, and we weren't. I wasn't racing. I was in middle school in the 90s, so I wasn't doing any triathlon racing, but that's the sense that we're getting from pretty much everyone, is that it's kind of Swimrun's in that infancy stage at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just sort of nicely competitive, but not too serious just yet. Well, not for most of us anyway.
So Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about how does a pro triathlete, I guess it makes sense, sports science seems like something that would be related to your job. But what was it about hydration and sports science that kind of got you enthused and eventually led to you starting your own company?
It was totally personal interest driven, really. I had so many problems with hydration when I was racing longer and hotter events that it was a source of immense frustration to me. And then the journey that I went on to try and unpick my own problem led me to think after a while, well, if I can't be the only person who's having this problem. So at that time, I was kind of transitioning into working with athletes a bit more, and I wasn't focusing entirely on hydration, but sort of applying what I'd learned through looking into my own problems was something I started to do with other people. I had a degree of success with that. Eventually, there was enough of it going on for us to say, well, actually, this looks like it could be an interesting business in its own right. And that's when we sort of started to put it together a little bit more formally. And that was just before that was sort of 2009, 2010, that kind of time. And then we formed the company in 2011, and it's been it's just been organic growth since then, really, of continuing to learn, continuing to layer on top of the roots that we started from.
Yeah, so I'm sure you were probably, back in the 90s or early 2000s there, it was probably a lot of, oh, well, you need more salt tabs, or you got to eat bananas on the course, or get your Gatorade, or there wasn't a lot of these really super scientific options really for people out there. So you kind of each reached the end of the rope with that, and you're like, I guess I'll do it better myself.
Yeah, I think what it was for me was back then the advice for not just for triathletes, the advice for athletes in the 90s, early 2000s was dehydration's this huge big problem. You need to drink regularly, and you need to drink quite a lot to combat it. And the general messaging was, not necessarily deliberately so, but it was basically more is better when it comes to hydration. And as someone, I knew I sweated a lot, so I always thought I've got to drink a lot. And the athlete mindset is that if doing one thing is good, or taking one of something is good, then taking two will be twice as good, and that probably most athletes will take 6 just to be sure.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my attitude with hydration. And I definitely overhydrated a lot. And that was a big part of the learning curve for me, because that advice was very one size fits all, and actually sort of starting to point a little bit too far in the wrong direction.
Interesting. And then, so where did you sort of get this light bulb moment? So Chris and I both took a sweat test.
Yeah.
And so when was that, like when you took the test? Because from, I believe, your Slow Twitch article that you have like a really high milligram loss per hour. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And that's kind of when that clicked for you, or?
Yeah, definitely. It started to click a little bit, I started to build up this idea that basically I knew I sweated a lot, and I knew that I felt like I lost a lot of salt as well, because it was very visible on my clothing and in my eyebrows and on my helmet straps and that kind of thing after races. A friend of mine who was a doctor had also put me down this track and said, look, we need to look at your electrolyte loss, because all of the symptoms that you're displaying, which for me was like low blood pressure, cramping, feeling really rough, really lousy after races, getting a bit of hyponatremia. All of that from his clinical viewpoint was similar to what he would expect to see in someone who'd lost a lot of electrolytes. And so he said to me, there's, you can do sweat testing. And alongside that, I'd been reading on very early internet message boards and forums for ultra running about people's attitudes towards taking salt tablets and sodium in races. And although it was all kind of anecdotal stuff, there were lots of little stories in there that struck a chord with me. And so in parallel to getting a sweat test and finding out that I lost a lot of salt in my sweat, as well as sweating a lot, I was reading these ultra running forums where there was all these arguments going on with people saying how much salt you should take. And some people were succeeding taking large amounts of salt and salt tablets during events, and were saying it was a game changer for them. So I kind of put 2 and 2 together, I basically massively increased my salt intake and kept my fluid intake where it was, or even reduced it. And it was like, that was the light bulb moment, because all of a sudden I could compete in the heat almost as well as I could in cooler conditions. Whereas in the past, the heat had always been my Achilles heel, and I would have always done really badly.
And let's give the audience a sense of like when you say massive amount of salt. So we took this test, which was a really cool experience, and we have photos and stuff that we'll post on this in the show notes and everything. But basically, they sort of hook up a positive and a negative electrode thing to your arm, and they stimulate the sweat glands, and then they capture the sweat from that, and then they measure the amount of sodium that you excreted, and that's a milligram, or it's usually delivered in a milligram per hour. And so I was 1,086 or 1,080 something, but Chris,
yeah. So this was actually, I mean, my whole world was shattered. Andy,
he was shelled sitting next.
I was really shelled because even talking to Tim, who did the test, who was awesome. Tim Fleming in Mill Valley. You should go see him if you need help. He's asking all these questions. I'm like, yeah, I don't sweat a lot. I'm not a super salty sweater. And he ran the test, and I was at like 1,800, kind of like at your level, Andy. And I just couldn't believe it. It was such a shock. And I would always just drink water when I work out, and never really worried about electrolytes because I always felt fine. And now I'm just kind of like ready to unleash some new potential that I didn't even know I had.
I'm worried his performance is going to increase so much. He's going to need a new swimmer. I'm worried.
That's the danger.
It was kind of the opposite because, doing a ultra marathon or triathlon or whatever, I was the person that my kit was just littered with salt stains, and every aid station, they're like, you got to get salt. You have to drink more. Like, people were always telling me that, but my gut's sloshing around, and I'm like, I can't take any more water. Like, I felt like a water buffalo running around, and Chris never had that experience. But it turns out he's the one losing like almost twice as much sodium as I was.
And it's funny, Andy, and I'd love your thoughts on this because I was sort of reliving some old race experiences that kind of went sideways on me, and I was just kind of looking at it with a new lens. I was doing this 50-miler in Tahoe, which was at altitude with heat. I was super well trained and prepared for it, and everything just went sideways. I couldn't keep anything down. I thought I was having like heat stroke. I was just drinking water. And now I'm thinking the elevation, the heat, and I was probably just losing so much salt that it was just affecting my ability to perform. I really think that's probably what happened.
I think the interesting thing about those, so talking about the numbers there for me, the figures that you're referring to is the milligrams of sodium you lose in every litre of sweat, which is about 32 ounces of sweat. So if you want to generalize, which I don't love doing all the time, but a sweat rate of about 1 litre an hour is not unusual for an endurance athlete. The range is quite wide, so it could be less, it could be 2 litres or 2.5 litres, even in someone who sweats a lot. But that kind of figure is per litre, and then you multiply it out by the actual amount of sweat. And the reason that it's an issue if you're losing more is because, like any element in the body or any mineral in the body, you need a certain concentration or a certain level of that to maintain normal function. And then once you start to find that you get depleted beyond a certain level, your homeostasis goes out of whack, your performance level starts to deteriorate. And people suffered with different kind of issues when their sodium levels drop. Quite often it can be like nausea and feeling a bit faint and feeling just rubbish. Some people get muscle cramps. The stuff around like not being able to absorb fluids and not being able to absorb calories is pretty common as well. That was a problem that I often had. And it was almost like sometimes if I had a belly full of water and food and that kind of thing, and the missing ingredient was a salt tablet, I could throw that in and then, it would absorb a lot more easily. So it's all about understanding that level of loss when that becomes a problem for you. And usually that's after a few hours of activity. But obviously if your losses are really high, like mine or yours, Chris, that can happen a lot earlier in a situation than someone who is losing it at a lower rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. But So I have a follow-up question to that, and we were talking about this before we went on air. So there's this whole area or body of knowledge that's sort of perpetuated by folks like Tim Noakes in his book Waterlogged, basically putting out the the hypothesis that your body knows what it's doing. Your body isn't going to give away electrolytes that it needs to maintain normal bodily function. So all you really need to drink is water, because why would your body, if you're a heavy sweater, a salty sweater, is because you have too much salt and you don't actually need it. That's why your body's getting rid of it. That seems to be totally contrary to everything, to sort of where science looks like it is now. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating area, because I think what it actually speaks to is not that Tim Noakes is right or wrong, or that the people came before him are right or wrong. But if you take most debates or most arguments in sports science, or in any walk of human life for that matter, you tend to find where these things start out is with two kind of extremes. And in hydration, we've had this relatively extreme view, which Noakes sort of in his book thinks or presents evidence that it comes from the Gatorade Sports Science Institute and that kind of thing, that we went from not drinking a lot during exercise to having the idea of drinking and taking electrolytes and carbs actually as well rammed down our throats by Gatorade, to the point where it was oversold and people thought, you've got to drink as much as you can, you've got to take loads of fluid, you've got to take loads of salt. And then his counter to that was actually, no, you've just got to drink when you're thirsty, you've just got to drink plain water, and that's all your body needs. So you've got these two really extreme viewpoints. And my argument with all of that is that neither is right or wrong. What they are is two extreme ends, and the truth for each individual probably lies somewhere between. Because this is a complex subject matter, because if you're talking about someone who's going out and exercising for an hour or two in relatively cool conditions, then yes, drinking just some water to the dictates of thirst is probably all they need to do, because their body will maintain homeostasis quite easily under those conditions. But when you get into the realms of endurance athletes pushing themselves very hard for hours and hours on end, either on back-to-back days or continuously, as some of us often do, especially in hot weather, the simple maths can tell you that you can develop fluid and electrolyte losses within a few hours that are really quite problematic for the body. And so the argument that not replacing those two to even a partial extent is wise is a little bit ridiculous. But I think that Noakes presented his argument in such an extreme way because it helped to get the conversation going. It helped to swing the conversation away from the problem of just saying you need to drink loads and loads all the time. Where my problem with it starts is the lack of individualization. Right. Because from experience, I know that basically you start to accrue a sodium loss through sweat the minute you start exercising. Now, for some people, that loss won't mount up until 5, 6, 7, 8 hours into an event to be problematic. For other people, it can be problematic after 2 or 3 hours. And it's having an appreciation of where your individual needs sit that makes all the difference.
And that's what I really, kind of like. We got this whole assessment about how much we excrete on the sodium per liter there. And then I did a sweat test. Chris and I did a 1 hour run, and I actually lost in 1 hour 2.25 liters.
Wow.
Which I was always the guy, like, I go for a 30-minute run, I'd be wringing my shirt out after because it's so soaked, or if I'm on the bike, like, there's just a puddle of sweat under the trainer. And it is so, it kind of is like anything else. Like, the shoes that I run in, they might be the worst thing ever for Chris. But for some reason, hydration prescriptions or like advice was always like kind of blanketed in this really uniform way that is obviously now kind of, after you get a little bit of science about it, it doesn't work for everybody because everyone is so catastrophically different human beings. It's just wild to think that Gatorade could prescribe the perfect solution for everybody, or not that Gatorade's a villain, Powerade might be. I don't know. Anyway, that's my point.
No, I agree, and I think that's an interesting point.
Question there?
No, it's pontificating.
I think your point about your sweat rate and comparing, because earlier you were saying about how you were the one who like caked in salt and all that kind of thing, and when you think about it, the math that we've got to do there is take your sodium concentration, if it's about 1 liter 1,000 milligrams per litre. If we just take that arbitrary number, 2.4 litres an hour as a running sweat rate for you in those conditions at that pace, if you multiply that out by 3 hours, that accrues you a loss of about just over 7 litres and over 7,000 milligrams of sodium, which ironically could be more salt than Chris is losing if Chris has a much lower sweat rate than you. So kind of understanding the interplay of those two is really important as well.
I mean, I realize this is very specific for myself, but any heavy sweaters, it's like I can't carry a half gallon of water to drink every hour. Like that's just not a realistic thing. So I have to sort of operate on this thing that I'm going to be on a deficit the entire way. So I have to manage that deficit the best that I can, I guess. And that was something that I had never really even had that knowledge to like put forth in my training or my races.
Yeah. And I think, bringing it back to precision hydration, I think it's a really interesting business model to be like, all right, let's just peel down a couple of levels. Obviously you can't have your own super precise hydration product, but it sounds like what Precision Hydration did is like, all right, well, let's just put people into 3 camps.
Yeah.
You have the 1,500 camp, you have the 1,000 camp, and the 500 camp. And then depending on what you're doing,
it's a good jumping off point.
like environmental, what's going on, how long is the race, what sports are you doing, temperature, all that stuff, that then you can almost like titrate what you need in terms of to try to achieve maximum performance. Was that kind of the idea of breaking it up into 3?
Yeah, fully. We actually started out with 4 bands. We had a lower one as well, which we still have a product which is very, very low in sodium, which some of the athletes that we work with will use for travel, or just as it's almost basically like an alternative to water. It's a bit more like flavored water in a sense, but we basically went for this kind of approach where rather than a custom drink for everyone, which is an unnecessary level of precision, we copied this side, essentially like the clothing model, like small, medium, large, extra large. And that covers most people. We debated, do we want 5, 3, 2 felt a bit, well, what it is, it felt a bit binary, it was just like low or high. We felt there needed to be a bit of graduation in there. And we thought that you wouldn't want to go to say 8 because that just becomes excessively complex for no reason. So I think we cover off the vast majority of people with those effectively the 3 main strengths, the 500, 1,000 and 1,500. And to put that in context, the 500 is quite similar to a regular sports drink. So most sports drinks that you just pick up off the shelf will have usually around about 500 milligrams of sodium per litre. So the 1,000 is like a double strength and the 1,500 is sort of triple strength. And what we found then is that a lot of athletes, because athletes, a lot of us are sort of scientifically minded, we're tinkerers, we play around with stuff, we try and offer guidance on how to use them, but what we've really built is a toolkit of products there which people can then go away and use and refine their strategy with. And as you said, Chris, it's kind of, maybe I might be 1,000 guy in cool weather, but I can jump it up to the 1,500 if I need to, if it gets real hot and humid.
Right.
So you're not kind of stuck with one.
So with that, let's bring it back a little bit to Swimrun. A lot of these events happen in cooler water, in cooler temperatures. The water's typically a little bit cooler as well. Obviously, you're wearing a wetsuit, which kind of messes up everything you're doing from a sweat perspective. What led you to want to partner with Swimrun? I mean, I think it's super interesting because you're essentially drinking less in a swim run than I think that you would in other events. So I'm just curious if there's, I know we're talking very precisely and there isn't a universal application of hydration for swim run, but so I guess I have a 2-part question. One, I think it's really interesting that you guys are partnering with Swimrun because we love the sport and we think that there's definitely room to understand hydration in swimrun events, that since it's still so young, but also kind of what's your take on what would be kind of like a average strategy?
A good place to start. Hydration strategy.
Yeah, it's a good question. So honestly, a big part of the motivation for being part of the Swimrun community as a brand and as a business is because we love it, because we want to support it, because you know, 5 out of 11 of us in the company, I think, have done a swim run at some point, at least one, if not more. And quite a few of us have been out to Sweden to the World Champs. We've supported the Swimrun USA series races, Lars Finninger's races as well. And it's not completely, you know, just an act of charity or altruism. We see the sport as cutting edge. You know, it's new and innovative. It's got our kind of people doing it. So we love, you know, running the business under our own terms. And so when you get to make decisions about, okay, well, what events do we want to align with and what kind of people do we want to go meet and support and reach out to, then Swimrun is top of the list. You know, it's cool. We love it. And that's why we're embedded in it. I think also, though, we do see the longer races as being a good proving ground for some of our products. You know, for me, honestly, the last time I raced the World Championships in Sweden, it was quite a warm year, and we had our 1500 milligram products on the course, which for me personally was, you know, obviously a huge benefit, because in a swim run, the interesting thing is you're very, very limited by what you can carry. So, you know, we figured that giving people kind of slightly stronger products on the course and giving them the option to obviously then titrate the electrolytes they're drinking with some water from the aid stations, and that would actually be a performance advantage in the warmer, if the conditions are warmer. So we thought that the products were kind of, you know, well suited to the demands of the sport, so it was a good fit. And the guys, I know that the guys at Otelo in particular were looking for, they like working with brands who are into the sport, not just corporate brands. So for us, it's a whole combination of reasons, but we love being part of it, or the community.
Well, I mean, totally agree with that.
Yeah, second. I don't know.
we also love it. So in terms of your average swim runner participating in a World Series distance race,
5 to 6 hours of swimming and running.
Yeah. Obviously, you want to take advantage of all the energy stations. Do you have any sort of general advice besides make sure that you're taking fluids and eating?
Yeah, I would say that the first most important thing is to turn up to the start of the race really well hydrated, because you know that you're going to dehydrate significantly during the course of a swim run, because you're so constrained about the amount of fluids and electrolytes you can take on board during the course of the event. And I won't go into the full sort of war and peace on it now, but we've got a good blog on our website called How to Start Hydrated, and it talks about using a strong drink like our 1500 or something mixed up to that strength immediately before the race to really top up your fluid and electrolyte levels. Because when you tell athletes to turn up to an event really well hydrated, the problem that you get is quite often they'll just drink tons of water in the last couple of days and end up then just diluting their body, diluting the sodium levels down, not actually carrying a significant amount more water, but putting themselves on the back foot from the start and ending up in the, you know, just peeing all the time. So I think, you know, learning to start properly hydrated, taking some strong electrolytes in the hour before the start is a really good idea. And if people do want the protocol and details on that, then they hit precisionhydration.com and search for the blog called How to Start Hydrated. It'll pop up.
We'll be sure to link to that one in the show notes. So what you're referring to is kind of, are you considering that like a preload? Because I know that's kind of a buzzword that's sort of been popping up the last 3 to 5 years or so.
Yes, a preload would be a sort of small dose of a very strong electrolyte drink taken immediately before an event. And the reason that's quite a powerful idea is that the electrolytes in that drink pull into your bloodstream, pull fluid with it and hold it there. And it can be a bit counterintuitive because it's not like drinking a lot, which is what most people think they've got to do to be hydrated. But it's a little bit of something which is going to stay in the body as opposed to a lot of water, which is mainly going to just run straight through. And that's the key difference.
And I swear I'm not bogarting this to make you give me a custom personalized hydration plan. But for people that I know I'm going to be operating at a deficit, it sounds like a preload would be almost absolute 100% must, non-negotiable. I have to do that because that's the only way I can like sort of maybe get ahead of some of this deficit that I'm running.
Definitely. For me, I'm putting myself in the same boat as you there. You know, high sweat losses, that's a must do for any event, especially ones where it's going to be hot. You know, that's non-negotiable for me. It's been a bit of a game changer since I've managed to get it right. And then once you're into once you're sort of into the event itself, the good thing about swim run events is the way to hydrate and refuel is sort of basically dictated to you by the layout of the energy stations. So it doesn't require a huge amount of planning. But what I would say is that we started carrying like those 500 ml or 16 ounce soft flasks during most events because they fold flat. You can stick them inside your wetsuit. And then basically I tried to figure out, depending on the length and the temperature, whether I needed to drink 1.5 or 2 of those from each aid station. And that was based on doing a bit of maths on how much I thought I'd sweat based on the weather conditions that were coming up, how long the overall event was. Because obviously if it's a shorter event, if it's a World Series event, not the World Championships, you can run a bit more of a deficit in 5 hours than because if you got to 5 hours in the World Championships with the same kind of deficit you finish a regular race with,
you're not finishing.
You can have a pretty miserable second half.
There,
yeah. So for me and I'm going to use myself as an example because I can talk numbers. It was at the Catalina event. I determined that it was very simple. At each aid station, I would try to drink the best part of one of those 500 ml soft flasks at the aid station or close to it, kind of get it down as fast as possible. I'd then fill up that flask as we left the aid station and run with it. And then I would drink as much as I felt I needed to in the next intervening, 15 minutes or so, and then dump the rest. And so for me, I probably ended up drinking about 24 ounces or about 750 millilitres from each of the aid stations.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, the guy that I raced with, though, I'm pretty sure Chris probably only drank about 1 bottle, if that, from each of the aid stations.
Wow.
Because for some reason
Chris Hoth.
Chris Hoth, yeah.
Bay Area,
Chris is just legend. Like way more hardcore than me, obviously.
He's a hardcore kind of guy.
Yeah, he's done a couple notable events.
Yeah. So, and I think Chris. What's interesting about Chris though is although he drinks less precision hydration than me on the course, he drinks more beer than me afterwards.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, yeah.
Well, everyone has to hydrate in their own way.
So that's maybe how he does it.
It could be. What I really appreciated as well is that if I'm going to call it a prescription, or maybe the general advice that Precision Hydration is putting out, and when we met with Tim again in the endurance in Mill Valley, listening to your own body and not if you're thirsty, hey, drink. If you're not thirsty, don't be guzzling down a half gallon of water because you know that you're a heavy sweater and I got to get water. It's like kind of trust your human instincts, I guess. And that's a really that's an easy, free thing that people get to do that doesn't require much thought. But
it doesn't require a ton of thought. But what I think it does is it requires over time a building up of experience. Mm-hmm. And that's where the sort of Tim Noakes thing and the Gatorade thing actually, if they thought about it, they could get along quite well. Because if you took the Gatorade idea of drinking to a predetermined plan, so you work out from the science what your sweat rate's like, how much sodium you're losing, and you try and build a plan to replace a percentage of that. That is not, in my mind, completely at odds with then the Tim Noakes approach of drink to thirst. If what you do is you kind of drink to thirst with that plan in mind, so you treat the plan a little bit flexibly. And that's what you kind of go in thinking you're going to do, but then you adjust it on the fly. And I think that's ultimately where, if we're trying to teach people how to look after their hydration and nutrition really, really well, the blended approach of a bit of planning and then a lot of instinct when you're actually doing the activities is the ultimate combination. And that's what elite athletes are really, really good at.
Right. Well, I think that's where elite anything, right? Like once you've had enough experience, like if you think of golf, right? What makes someone a good golfer is having played a ton of golf, so they remember how far the distance was and the last time they were in the sand trap and what they need to do, and you
How
sort
they
of
hit their line,
analogize.
yeah.
You sort of analogize over time what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then you sort of tweak it to what I mean. That's honestly one of the greatest things about sports. And that's when I was heavy into triathlon, I loved the 70.3 because it was just long enough for you to make mistakes, but you could recover from them. And it was just, you kept trying to figure it out and put it together the perfect race. I mean, I remember when Chipper put together the perfect race finally in Santa Cruz, it was always the run. Like there was always something happen in the run. And then you finally figured out the run, and then you had like the awesome race that you've been trying to get. I think on the nutrition and hydration side, it's the same thing where, I mean, I would just say I would encourage everyone to do a sweat test, because it was just so eye-opening. Like my own perception of myself was completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Chris, when he told him, when Tim told him the number, Chris was like, like his jaw had help him pick it up off the floor. I was so surprised. And Precision Hydration has their own sweat test that you could take online, and it has a bunch of different sports. And I appreciate that you have a swim run specific category to choose from, because it is such a unique discipline or collection of disciplines, I guess. And that's probably what you would recommend, Andy, as like a good starting point to that, tied with how much sweat you're actually losing. And that's done by exercising for 90 minutes and weighing yourself before, not taking on any fluids if you can, and then weighing yourself after, in your birthday suit is preferred, as your clothes are going to take on sweat. But is that kind of the best starting point if people are kind of interested in cracking the code on their hydration?
Definitely, I would say starting with the online sweat test is a really good point, because that's free. It takes like 2 minutes, if that, to fill out. You get an email with details on what to do, and then following on from that, what a lot of people don't necessarily realize is that we've got a team in the office, or not in the office at the moment because we're working from home, but in front of our computers. And if people reply to those emails or send us an email to the address hello@precisionhydration.com, we will help you then hold your hand and further tailor the advice, chat to you about what you've been doing, your experiences, and try and help you to get the best out of it. Because we realize that with this whole thing about hydration and electrolyte replacement and the wider topic of sports nutrition, there's not a lot of magic that you need to understand out there. There's just some good systematic stuff that you need to be doing. And we've got a fair amount of experience now on working with athletes one-to-one, and we do that all the time. We've even started because of the recent lockdown situation, and now that, even though that's easing now, we're carrying it on. You can book one-to-one video calls with the team. We've got some sports scientists, myself included, who will sit on one-to-one video calls and talk you through this stuff. So we'd love to hear, especially from any swim runners, because we can chat a bit of swim run at the same time as well.
Well, I didn't even know about that, but I know what I'm doing this afternoon.
Yeah, give them a call.
What's your cell phone number? I'll just call you up.
I love that, and it almost seems like our show has always become a love fest for Swimrun at some point, and I think this is the point where, it seems like such a great fit and so in line with sort of the ethos of Swimrun that it's like, hey, we're just trying to help everyone get from A to B, and hydration is a key part of that. So, it's just so cool that you guys do that.
And Andy, I'd love to get your kind of take on recovery. Now, when I say recovery, in my head, I'm thinking, oh man, I finished my run or my bike ride or whatever activity. I need to get this protein shake with 20 to 40 milligrams or grams of protein in as soon as possible, and then eat my balanced, nutritious meal with mostly plants and vegetables and that sort of stuff. But sort of what I'm kind of finding out a little bit as I research more on the precision hydration method and meeting with Tim there, is you actually need to kind of, now especially someone like me who's in a deficit in terms of sodium and sweat loss deficit, I need to kind of bring back up to normal. Could you speak a little bit to that, please?
Yeah, sure. I think if you're a heavy sweater, and if you're training in the summer or you're training at any time in the heat and losing a lot of sweat and sodium, then there is an inevitability about the fact you're going to have a significant hydration deficit when you finish. And whilst you will probably find that you'll recover that within 24 hours even if you don't do anything specific, you'll be thirsty. You'll put salt on your food, or you'll eat food with salt in it. You'll drink enough. Your body will sort of drive you to drink enough to replace that. If you want to be more proactive about your recovery, you want to recover a little bit faster and a little bit more completely, and that's really important. If you're trying to like go and you've done a hard session, you've got to go and pull a hard shift at work, or you've got to train again the same day, then I would say it's almost the reverse, or the same, but in reverse as the preload thing. It's make sure that you get a strong electrolyte drink in as one of the first things that you do when you finish the session. It doesn't have to be a ton of it, but 16 ounces, 24 ounces, whatever quenches your thirst sufficiently. But by having this very strong science behind the concept that extra sodium in a recovery drink means that you pee way less, and you actually absorb that water and get it back in your bloodstream where it's needed a lot faster. So, making sure that in the summer, I always find that, the classic one for me that catches me out these days is on a Saturday morning. I quite often go for a long run, which is not especially long, but it's maybe 90 minutes to, close to 2 hours if I'm really keen. And if I often won't, I'll only take a very small drink or none at all. But what that means is I really have to make sure that I take a strong hydration recovery drink afterwards, because otherwise I'm sort of baggage for the rest of the day. It takes me ages to recover. Mm-hmm. So just having that, and I always mix it up before I go, make sure it's in the fridge, nice and cold, and then it's a no-brainer. It's exactly what you feel like drinking. You just get it down. And
I think my wife would be the term baggage. That nothing describes me after a big workout. I am you threw a big duffel bag on the couch, because I'm shelled after a big 3 or 4 hour effort. I need a couple hours to get back usually, and now it's like clicking that, oh yeah, well I just came home and probably chugged 32 ounces of water and ate a big meal, but I am probably 3 grams or 4 grams in the hole of sodium almost. So it's more about getting back to level, quote unquote, or what you kind of recovering from that deficit from a sodium standpoint, not necessarily a fluid standpoint. Because after that hour sweat test that I did, I think if I was trying to recoup all the liters I lost, I was drinking like almost a half gallon of water. It seems absurd.
Yeah, and it compounds then, because you just end up peeing more for ages, feeling uncomfortable. I think you're way better off drinking sensible amounts, but with a strong drink. So we should get you some of the pH 1500s to try, after some of these longer sessions, because it'd be really interesting to hear how you get on with that. Because I have a feeling that in your case, especially with that heavy sweat loss, you'd find it pretty beneficial.
Yeah, and it's kind of sounding like with runners. If you go for a run, you should foam roll afterwards. Make sure you're sort of warming down your muscles and doing dynamic warm-ups and cool downs and things like that. It sounds like on the hydration side, you'd advocate for, just because the run ends doesn't mean that your work ends. Like, you need to make sure you're starting your recovery protocol as quickly as possible based on your numbers to be able to perform better the next time out.
Definitely, and make life easy for yourself. I think one of the biggest but most influential steps is mix the drink up before you go, stick it in the fridge, and then it's the easiest thing in the world to then do it. Whereas we all know what it feels like when you get back. You just kind of grab whatever's there, or you put it off because you're doing something, and it's just make it part of the process, and it takes care of itself a lot easier.
Love it.
Well, this has been super enlightening. I think thanks again for being on the show and for setting us up with these sweat tests, because it was really interesting, and we would definitely recommend people to check it out. It's another layer of OCD possibility.
Yeah.
but I think so many people focus on speed and agility and things like that, but I don't think people focus enough on hydration and proper nutrition and stuff.
Well, the great thing is as well, Chris, we've got some, like you met Tim down in Mill Valley, and Tim Fleming is one of our very early sweat testing centers. And as you found out, Tim's a great guy, very knowledgeable in his own right. And we've kind of upskilled him on some of the precision hydration stuff. But Tim is a expert in his own right, sports nutrition, training, whatnot. So by going and doing a sweat test somewhere, if you get the opportunity, you do often get a chance to tap into the expertise of a real expert, and that's one of the other advantages of it.
Yeah, it was great, and I think we caught Tim at a great time because I believe we were his first client since the shelter in place.
Shutdown,
so he had 3 months of conversation built up that he was happy to unleash on us. We could have stayed there for 2 or 3 hours because I was so fascinated by what he was saying and the science, and like it just felt like the clouds were clearing in front of us and we could kind of see like, hey, there's a solution to the problem. So if people have listened to this and they're curious and they have their own problems, Andy, where would they, obviously precisionhydration.com, and what do you recommend, that online sweat test, or where should they go?
Online sweat test is a great place to start because, as I said, it's free, it's easy, it's labeled all over the website to do it. The next best place is to email us at hello@precisionhydration.com, because we pride ourselves in getting back to people as quickly as possible and as comprehensively as possible with questions. And then if you inquire, if you're interested, you can book a video call, as I was saying, with the team. And the easiest way to do it at the moment is email us at hello@precisionhydration.com. We can send you a link to a booking system that allows you to pick a time slot and get to speak to someone. I think now through the website at the moment as well, we have got the ability for people to talk to us through WhatsApp. So you can just go to our website, click on the little WhatsApp icon and have a chat. So I think that's one of the big differences that I like to emphasize to people, that unlike other people see us to a degree rightly like a sports drink brand, which is, I guess, that is a big part of the product that we sell is a drink product. But we're definitely not that first and foremost. We see ourselves as kind of a consultancy for athletes, in order to get their hydration right. And we've got testing and we've got products that are part of the process for that. But the reason that I think we're having such an impact with the people that we work with is because of the conversations we're having with them, in order to get them understanding what to do with our products and whether they're a good fit for them, how to use them exactly, because it's when you get those things exactly right that you really get the maximum performance. Because, in endurance sport, we're bombarded with so many products, not just nutritional products, but all sorts of products. But at the end of the day, using them correctly is equally as important as the actual efficacy of the product itself. If you can, the amount of times that I've seen people use products poorly is, amazing.
Like putting a goo into a water bottle and like shaking it up and doing something cute like that. Yeah. There's all sorts. People love a bit of like home chemistry stuff for some reason when it comes to sports nutrition. And I think actually sometimes it's good to break all of that down, simplify it, and then get people on the right track. And, you can see the difference then in performance. Awesome. Well, again, Andy, we really appreciate you being on and like sharing just a fraction of your obviously wealth of knowledge. And we would encourage anybody to go check out Precision Hydration. They do have a lot of extremely scientific resources, and they want to help you solve your problems. So you're, at least with the hydration, I don't know what sort of psychiatric degrees they hold. Yeah, they're not giving you marriage counseling, but yeah. Hydration solve. No, we'll stay in our lane. I think Perfect. Awesome. One thing I forgot to mention, guys, actually for your listeners, is Chris has set up for you a discount code, which is Low Tide Boyz, or one word, and that'll get any of the people listening to this 15% off the products on our website until the end of July 2020. Oh, wow. Awesome. That is very generous. We'll be sure to, include that in the notes so you don't have to try to, it's pretty easy. Low Tide Boyz with a Z. Low Tide Boyz with a Z, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. We'll definitely share that widely. Andy, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Thanks, fellas. Great to talk to you anytime. I'm happy to chat Swimrun. Thank you for listening to the Low Tide Boyz, a Swimrun podcast. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review on iTunes if you're so inclined. You can also sign up for a newsletter at lowtideboyz.com. That's boys with a Z. And check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boyz on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, drop us an email at lowtideboyz@gmail.com. We'd like to thank Writing Easy Records for our show music and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swimrun activities, hobbies, and other bullshit we do.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
And then a run.
And then another swim.
Then another run.
And then another swim.
And then run to the finish line. And just keep going until you're done.
Yes, or
until
run
you
to
cross the finish line.
Or run to the car.
Or run to your car.
Somewhere. Just keep running.
Peace.